On June 24th, 2021, at 1:22 a.m., a 12-story condominium building in Surfside, Florida experienced a catastrophic structural failure. This collapse lasted less than 12 seconds. 98 people died. The National Institute of Standards and Technology has been investigating this collapse since June 25th, 2021. Their findings point to something significant: structural problems that had been documented years before the failure occurred. This is an analysis of what happened at Champlain Towers South. Champlain Towers South was constructed in 1981 at 8777 Collins Avenue in Surfside, Florida. The building was part of a three-tower complex, each 12 stories high, located directly on the Atlantic coastline. The structure contained 136 residential units. At the time of collapse, the building was 40 years old. Surveillance footage shows the central section of the building collapsing first, followed approximately 9 seconds later by the northeast corner. 55 units were destroyed. Rescue teams recovered 35 survivors from the standing portion of the building and 4 individuals from the debris field. The remaining structure was demolished on July 4th due to structural instability and the approach of Tropical Storm Elsa. Now, to understand why this happened, we need to look at what investigators found in the years leading up to the collapse. In 2018, as part of Miami-Dade County's 40-year recertification process, the Condominium Association hired Morabito Consultants, a structural engineering firm, to conduct a comprehensive building inspection. On October 8, 2018, engineer Frank Morabito submitted his findings. The report identified a pattern of structural problems throughout the building, starting with the pool deck. The engineering team found that the waterproofing membrane beneath the pool deck had failed. More significantly, they discovered the waterproofing had been installed flat rather than sloped. This meant water couldn't drain. It simply pooled on the surface until it had evaporated. Over time, that standing water penetrates concrete, and in this case, it had been doing so for years. This water penetration led to the second major finding. Throughout the parking garage below the deck, the engineers documented extensive concrete damage. They used the term spalling, which describes what happens when concrete breaks apart and exposes the steel reinforcement bars underneath. In a building this close to the ocean with constant salt air exposure, those exposed steel bars corrode. And as the rebar corrodes, it expands, which causes more concrete to crack and break away, and this just accelerates the cycle. The engineers also found that previous repair attempts had been ineffective. Earlier work done to patch the concrete was failing, which meant the deterioration was continuing unchecked. The report included this specific warning: failure to replace the waterproofing in the near future will cause the extent of the concrete deterioration to expand exponentially. The estimated cost for the necessary repairs was $9 million. The question became, what would the condo association do with this information? On November 15th, 2018, approximately 1 month after receiving the engineering report, the Champlain Towers South Condominium Board held a meeting. Minutes from that meeting show that Ross Prieto, a building official for the town of Surfside, attended and discussed the Morabito report with residents. According to the official minutes, Prieto informed the board that the report had been reviewed and that it appeared the building was in very good shape. This assessment directly contradicted the engineering findings that had been documented just weeks earlier, and the repairs were not initiated. In April 2021, a follow-up inspection noted that the structural problems had worsened significantly. By June 2021, the condo board finally approved a repair program now estimated at $15 million due to the deterioration that had continued to occur over the 3-year delay. However, the main structural work had not commenced by the time of the collapse. The question investigators have been examining is, what was the sequence of failure that led from these documented problems to a total structural collapse? The National Institute of Standards and Technologies has identified what they're calling their leading failure hypothesis based on evidence recovered from the site. The failure sequence appears to have started with the pool deck slab. The pool deck was reinforced concrete slabs supported by columns, and as years of water penetration had degraded the concrete and corroded the rebar, the connections between the slab and the support columns were becoming progressively weaker. According to witness accounts and surveillance data, the pool deck collapsed at approximately 1:14. This initial failure destabilized the columns that were supporting both the pool deck and the residential floors above. 8 minutes later, at 1:22, the building itself began to collapse. Once the pool deck slab failed, it created what structural engineers call a progressive collapse scenario. The pool deck was connected to the building's support structure, and when it fell, it pulled on those connections and removed critical support from the columns. In structural engineering, there's a concept called redundancy. Buildings are designed with multiple load paths so that if one element fails, the load can redistribute to the other elements. What appears to have happened here is that the pool deck failure removed critical support. The load couldn't redistribute because of the existing structural degradation, and the system experienced cascading failure. Once the building collapse initiated at 1:22, the entire failure sequence lasted approximately 12 seconds. The NIST investigation has been ongoing. Since June 25th of 2021, they've been examining building materials, reviewing construction documents, analyzing surveillance footage, and conducting structural testing. As of now, they've obligated approximately $15 million to this investigation. Their current findings focus on several factors: the original design flaw in the pool deck drainage, construction defects in how the columns were built, years of deferred maintenance, and the failure of multiple oversight systems. Separate from the technical investigation, there have been extensive legal proceedings. The property was sold for $120 million, and those funds were distributed to the victims' families and unit owners. Multiple lawsuits have been filed against the engineering firm, the condo association, and the town of Surfside. NIST expects to release their final technical report in 2025, and that report will include specific findings about the failure mechanism and recommendations for building code and inspection procedures. The Champlain Towers South collapse is the third deadliest non-deliberate structural failure in the United States history. What the evidence shows is a building with documented structural problems, a 3-year gap between inspection, repair, and failure sequence that started with a known design flaw. The technical investigation is still ongoing, but the timeline is clear. Problems were identified, repairs were delayed, and 98 people died when the structure failed.